This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
My heart sunk when I got the news about Brandon's injury. This guy has worked extremely hard to get himself back in shape, back in playing shape to have a solid 2020 season. So obviously, we're feeling, we feel for him, have to go through this again, obviously, but we know that he'll push through. He's done a great job with all his rehab and getting himself back. So we're very confident there.
That was Doug Peterson this morning, right off top of the press conference on the Zoom call or whatever platform they were using. Brandon Brooks, news hit last night. Can't be ignored, can't be denied, can't get away from it. Brandon Brooks out for the season, torn Achilles. He was rehabbing another injury. He hurt himself, and now one of the Eagles' most important offensive linemen is out for the rest of the season. Text board is open. 609-403-0973 is the text board to get on the conversation. I'm Josh Hennig. Warm up, 97.3 ESPN. Text board open. 609-403-0973. Coming up at 1:25, we'll be talking with Kevin Kinkead from Crossing Broad as there's a lot of news going on, but part of it involves the MLS. If anybody watched the Sports Center special last night, they didn't just have the MLS commissioner on. They had a Philadelphia Union player, and they talked about what it's like for the MLS to return. And, another day, baseball can't figure it out, but another sport can. Predictable, right? So we'll touch on that coming up with Kevin Kinkead and get in some Sixers and NBA with him as well here on 97.3 ESPN. But we can't escape the news that is Brandon Brooks. When people asked me throughout the offseason what I thought of his Eagles team, it was with the assumption that Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson would be back, that both of those players would be back on this team for the 2020 season. It gets overlooked at times about the fact that you were without two of your best offensive linemen in that playoff game. And in that playoff game, the Eagles allowed 7 sacks. And now you have Brandon Brooks, who, according to ESPN Stats and Info, has started all 48 games over the last 3 seasons, has played 95% of offensive snaps, has been a Pro Bowl selection each year, and he's only missed one full game, including the postseason, and that was that loss to Seattle last year. At what point do you worry? I know I'm certainly a little concerned because when you think about the Eagles' offensive line, to me, the hierarchy of importance, Brandon Brooks is either second or third most important offensive lineman on this team, hands down. And in some order, in my opinion, I believe it's Jason Kelce is the number one most important offensive lineman. Kelce is the center. Kelce is the linchpin. Kelce is the orchestrator, the chief, the leader of that offensive line. And number 2 is either Lane Johnson or Brandon Brooks. And it really depends on how you value each player. Lane's missed more games in the last few years. Part of it was because of a suspension a couple of years ago. And Brooks, most of his injuries have come either at the end of the year and he's been able to rehab at the offseason and come back. So this injury now puts the Eagles in an incredible predicament because you were building this team under the understanding that your starting right side of your line would be back for the 2020 season. Now, all signs show that Lane should be back, but without Brooks, you have a massive hole at left guard. Right guard. And there's a few things the Eagles can do. We know that Matt Pryor's on the roster. Matt Pryor has the quote-unquote most experience at guard of all the backups. So there's that situation going on with Pryor. I don't know if I want to go into training camp, though, with Pryor as my starting left guard, because if he doesn't play well in camp, there's got to be a lot of questions about what he can and can't do with the whole weight on him to play. When I think about the Eagles' options, my first instinct is to say, listen, I don't know if there is a good option out there. There may be some workable, viable options, but I'm not going to sit here and act like any of those options are elite. I'm not going to act like any of the Eagles' options are legitimate replacements for what Brandon Brooks brings to the table. Brandon Brooks is arguably one of the handful of the best guards in the league. It was him and maybe three other dudes, and that's it, who were in the conversation. He was so dependable. He was so stable out there. He was so good at his job that you almost took him for granted sometimes how good he was. And now without him, you just have to wonder where the Eagles go from here. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Now, I'm not saying throw away the season. I'm not saying it's over and done with. Pack your bags and go home, because the Eagles won a Super Bowl with Halapuli Vaitai as your left tackle. So the Eagles have dealt with injuries before. This isn't something new, okay? Let's be realistic. But when your primary backup is Matt Pryor, who also is from TCU, like Vaitai was, it doesn't scream a ton of confidence. It screams, oh no, here we go again. Now, the good news is it didn't happen in season, it happened in the offseason, and it's June 16th, and training camp is more than a month away. So the Eagles do have an opportunity to try to figure this out. Aside from just sticking Matt Pryor in there to just say, good luck, we're all counting on you. Now, you do have some options. Now, NFL insider Adam Kaplan, who is on Football at 4 every Thursday on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, he put out a list of the best available guards. And if you want to see the full list, go to 973ESPN.com. We have an article up there right now what the Eagles' options are for in replacement of Brandon Brooks. And Adam Kaplan's full list is on the website. Of the list of players he puts out there, though, there's only a handful that stand out. I would say there's probably 3 names that stand out, and it's the top 3 on the list. And the rest of them is kind of a coin flip. And if you want to see the full list again, 973ESPN.com or the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. So you got Larry Warford, Ron Leary, Josh Klein. And we'll just go in reverse order. Josh Klein is an offensive lineman who previously started for the Patriots and the Titans and the Vikings. Solid offensive lineman, nothing too crazy or exciting. But he is a guy who has started 18 games in the NFL. 18 games with the Patriots, 46 games with the Titans, and then 13 games with Minnesota. So he is a viable starter in his early 30s. He's got experience. Again, your goal is not to quote-unquote replace Brandon Brooks. It's to fill the void. So Klein is a viable option. The name before that I mentioned was Ron Leary. He is the former Cowboys offensive lineman. He himself started 47 games for the Cowboys. He's also in his early 30s. He played the last 3 years with Denver. He also has 76 career starts at guard. Now, most of those starts were at left guard, not right guard. But he has some experience at right guard, but most of his experience is at left. I'm not sure how that may affect some people's opinion of him going out on the field, but it's part of the reality. Okay, some guys, they can move back and forth across the line. Some guys can't. It's kind of a hit or miss thing. And then you got Larry Warford. And for many of you out there, Larry Warford may sound familiar because Warford is a guy who's been a Pro Bowler. He's a guy who has started games with the New Orleans Saints. In fact, every year he played for the Saints, the last 3 years, he was selected to the Pro Bowl. He himself has started the majority of his career at right guard. He himself is slightly younger than Klein and Leary. So you could argue that Warford is probably the best option of the names that Adam Kaplan put out there. And again, you can see the full list at 973ESPN.com. Warford is very interesting because he has started over 100 games in the NFL, and the majority of those starts are at right guard, which is Brandon Brooks' position. Also, considering he played in New Orleans, he is familiar with a offense that does run a certain style that the Eagles do run, which is that spread them out, different formations, tight end in, tight end out, movement across the line. So an argument can be made with Warford being a little younger than the other two names, being a 3-time Pro Bowler, and playing the majority of his career at right guard. He may be your best option. Maybe. Now, my only question for the three guys who are available, Warford, Leary, and Klein, is why are they still available? Is it they were asking for too much money? Is it that maybe their markets dried up because people didn't view them as valuable veterans? Were they asking for too many years on a contract? There's a lot of questions that go into the why behind all three of those guys being available. But if push came to shove, if you're asking me what am I going to do at right guard, well, I'm calling Larry Warford first, his agent, and trying to figure out what his availability is for this season. And maybe considering Brooks is coming off of an Achilles tear that he sustained in June, maybe you sign Warford to a 2-year contract. Only the first year is guaranteed. The second year is kind of one of those situations where it's not guaranteed. You have the flexibility to move on from him if you really want to, because Brooks may be back. You gave Brooks a huge contract, so you don't want to leave him out to dry. You're paying him a lot of money to play right guard for you and be an elite right guard in the NFL. So if you were to sign somebody, you want to maybe not sign them for a long-term deal, but a long enough term deal as insurance in case Brooks might not be ready to go to start next year. Because as far as I'm concerned, look, I understand that Matt Pryor is the backup, but I think that we overlooked the fact that part of the reason why Vaitai played as well as he did in 2017, filling in for Jason Peters, is because of the fact that teams didn't have a lot of tape on him. He had half a season to sit under Peters and watch him play. And because of the fact that Peters was still mentoring him from the sideline. So he had little tape on him. Teams didn't fully know how to game plan for him yet. And when the Eagles changed quarterbacks because of Carson Wentz's injury, there was another adjustment defenses had to make. So there were two different times teams had to adjust to the Eagles' offense, one because of Peters going down and one because Wentz went down. So Vaitai had a little bit of wiggle room to maybe get away with some things, whereas coming into a season, teams are going to be able to have more of a chance to prepare for you. So maybe that's a better reason why you want Warford out there instead of Pryor. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. The news broke last night. Brandon Brooks out for the year. Huge, huge blow to the Eagles. Rob from Bayville on the text board chimes in at 609-403-0973. Says, offensive guard is underrated and unsung in the NFL. Quarterbacks can get away with an edge rusher. However, almost every quarterback can be beat by pressure up the middle, not to mention the obvious loss to the run game. That's Rob from Bayville. Yeah, I want to hit on the last part, Rob, because one of the reasons why people like myself and others have looked at Miles Sanders and said this guy could have a huge year in 2020 is because the assumption was if the Eagles came back with both of the men on the right side, Brooks and Johnson, that Miles Sanders is going to have a better line in front of him. He's going to have another year under the offense. He's going to have cohesion on that side of the line. And as I said, Brooks is one of the best in the NFL. So whether you're running the ball or screening out of the backfield, it puts Miles Sanders in a position to be successful. Now you take that huge, important part out of the offense. The question is, does the Eagles' offense, especially the running game, start out a little slowly in 2020? Is there some issues with whoever starts at right guard, whether it's a free agent like Warford, whether it's a young player like Matt Pryor, or if they move, say, Amalu from left to right and they put somebody else at left guard, whatever the scenario is, how many games does it take for an Eagles team that has had no OTAs, no mini camps, is going straight in the training camp if all things go as expected, because it's June 16th. Who knows what the world can be like a month from now. But if you go into the season, who knows how long this offense could take to get up to speed, especially an offense that is depending on Miles Sanders to be that primary back. I'm telling you, the loss of Brandon Brooks is massive. Can they fill the void? Yes. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. 609-403-0973. Tom from the Village chimes in and says, what if they finally take their training wheels off of Jordan Mailata? That's Tom from the Village. Well, first of all, Mailata is being trained to be a tackle. I don't think he has any real experience with guard at all. And if you put him at tackle, who are you kicking inside? I doubt that you're going to take one of the best right tackles in the NFL, Lane Johnson, and kick him inside. No, you want him on the outside. You'd rather have one of the best at their position they are best at. I don't think Mailata has a lot of experience practicing at guard. From what I understand, every game he's had is at tackle. And if he's only a tackle, whose job he's taking away? I don't think Mailata is the answer right now, Tom from the Village. I appreciate the poll. I appreciate you digging deep into the Eagles' depth chart, but I think the Eagles' hope is that Mailata is a backup tackle going into the season, not a starting guard. Also, he's a huge man. I don't know how he would fit in on the line. You know, a lot of times bigger guys, they don't make a very good transition to guard. You know, there's a handful of guys like Evan Mathis, who's a taller guy who's moved from tackle to guard who has success. But typically, the larger player has a little trouble moving outside to inside because of the confinements of the position. When you're a guard, you have to remember that there's a lot more leveraging and there's a lot more, you have to make a quick block. You don't have a lot of time or movement around you. You just got to go make your block and get your assignment and boom. Tackle, you have to guard someone who may be trying to go around the outside, who's trying to cut inside. You may have them to be able to stretch outside on a run play. You may have to switch across the line on a pull. Guard is just different. Again, I think that Pryor is the primary backup. They're obviously going to try to see if they can give him a chance. But as Adam Kaplan mentioned, and again, you can see the full list at 973ESPN.com, whether it's Warford, Leary, or Klein, I expect the Eagles to sign one of these guys who Adam mentions on the list. And personally, I would just go full steam at Warford because the guy's a 3-time Pro Bowler. The guy has been one of the best in his position as well. He is a free agent. He's not old. He's in his late 20s. If all the medicals clear and he's not going to ask for an arm and a leg financially, that's the guy I go after. And then I go into camp with a veteran like Warford and with Pryor, and I see what happens. Again, ideally, if everything works out, you go get a guy like Warford because he's going to put you in position to probably be the most successful you can be. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Again, coming up in a few minutes, we'll talk with Kevin Kinkead from Crossing Broad here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT chimes in and says, Football 101, Brooks is only good because he's in between Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce. That's Dan from EHT. Well, I think it's unfair. If you watch Brandon Brooks, he doesn't allow a lot of sacks. He's a guy who typically stymies the opposing player almost every time on passing plays, and he's probably one of the most underrated athletes on run plays. So I think that to say that he's only good because he's between Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce is ignoring the fact that this is a guy who doesn't get called for a lot of holds, hasn't been called for a false start in 3 years. He hasn't been called for a false start since 2016, for goodness sake. This is a guy who has never been called for an offside in his NFL career. And frankly, in Philadelphia, he's only had 9 penalties in his entire 4 years in Philadelphia. So I think it's a little unfair to sit here and say that he's only good because he's in between Johnson and Kelce. The numbers tell you that he doesn't make a lot of mistakes at guard. He plays very well. And let's be realistic. And Kelce used to have a lot of problems with leverage. He used to have a lot of problems with power rushers. And a guy like Brandon Brooks, who's played guard his entire life, 335 pounds, he's a physical beast. He's the guy that the Eagles know can take on the bigger defensive linemen that give Kelce problems. So on assignments, when Kelce is pointing out the assignments, Kelce knows that he's got a monster next to him that can take on these huge, hulking defensive linemen around the league. For his part, Kelce is a little undersized. He's been successful because he's smart and he's intelligent and he works his butt off to be the best center in the NFL, but he's not a powerful center. You know, back in the day, guys like Hank Fraley had that great, upper body leverage and strength. Kelce doesn't have that. So you could argue that, yes, Kelce and Johnson are among the best in the NFL, but part of the reason why Kelce is healthy because he has a left guard like Brandon Brooks for 4 years, previously at left guard before Sayamaho like Wisniewski, who were very strong, very physical, who protected Kelce from the more big, physical, powerful D tackles in the league. So don't underrate what Brandon Brooks brought to this team just because he was in between two very talented men on the offensive line. We'll get back to more of your texts in just a bit at 609-403-0973 here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Coming up next, Kevin Kinkead from Crossing Broad right here. I'm Josh Hennig. You're listening to the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Welcome back in the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. As promised, joining us right now on the Boardwalk on the High. I'll get back to your text in just a bit. But as promised, Kevin Kinkead from Crossing Broad joins us. Last night on that Return of Sports Center special, they had all the commissioners. Well, one of the commissioners was Don Garber of the MLS. They also had Philadelphia Union player Alejandro Bedoya as well on there. So a little MLS Philly flavor mixed in on ESPN television last night. And what is this news with Kevin Durant and the Union? And why is the MLS able to figure out how to come back when half these other sports can't? Hopefully he can answer all these questions. Is Kevin Kinkead of Crossing Broad right here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, how you doing today?
Josh, what's going on, man? It's always good to be on 97.3 ESPN.
Well, I figured also, you being the MLS aficionado you are, you could probably answer some of the head-scratching questions people have because, frankly, if anybody watched that special last night, one of the biggest takeaways is how can a soccer league like the MLS figure out how to return and half these other sports can't?
Yeah, I guess it's just as easy as not shooting yourself in the foot.
not having a contentious labor dispute between millionaires and billionaires, and just the recognition that knowing that you are a quote-unquote fringe sport outside of the four major North American sports, and that there might be an opportunity here to get some exclusivity and have some eyeballs on the product that otherwise would not be there. There are other leagues that are returning. NWSL is coming back. UFC, as you know, had some eyeballs, some exclusivity on it for these last couple of weeks. But yeah, coming back before baseball and basketball and hockey and football may give you the opportunity for some people to watch the sport that would not otherwise. And when you look at the Bundesliga being back right now, La Liga and the Premier League coming back this week as well, it's kind of the entire sport of soccer. It's a good time to have an opportunity to maybe pull some new fans. People who are just starved to watch any kind of sports, or maybe even some disgruntled baseball fans, some disillusioned baseball fans who maybe aren't very happy with what's going on right now between Commissioner Manfred and the owners and the players.
Now, you mentioned Bundesliga. How much do you think of their return is impacting a league like MLS because of the fact that it is the same sport? It is soccer, so it's not like it's a totally different transition. It's pretty much a similar setup when it comes to the game and everything.
Yeah. It did kind of provide a blueprint not only to soccer for how this specific sport can work, but okay, here's how we're going to do the testing, and this is what we're going to do with fans in the stands, and it gave us an example of what fake crowd noise sounds like, and La Liga was doing the virtual fans in the seats, which looked like a bad version of Madden '94. Just trying to have letting them go first, and then everybody can sort of look off of them and say, hey, this works or this doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I think that was also a thing that pulled extra attention on it, because you had, like websites, for example, like Awful Announcing, right, who might not really care about soccer, might not write a lot about soccer, but they were doing Bundesliga headlines and La Liga headlines because they were sort of the first go-through, along with the KBO here, as to how this would work out in a post-COVID world. So of course it was easier for MLS to look at it and say, okay, here's what they're doing from a soccer perspective. Then we have kind of a blueprint, a skeleton here for us to work off of, and we can build our COVID, response and plan around this. And I think it was just a good, it's just good for them to go first and sort of like provide that structure for everybody else.
I think another question people have is, because of all of the arrows shooting back and forth between the baseball players and the owners, is what is the financial structure of the MLS? Why is it that their financial structure is not an impediment to their return as it might be for some of the other leagues?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because MLS is single entity and it's a salary cap. So it's much more closer. I think a lot of people got to realize that most of the MLS owners, well, not most of them, but when the league founded, it was a lot of NFL guys. Don Garber came from the NFL. Bob Kraft was an owner in the early days, and he still is an owner now. But they follow the NFL model of revenue sharing, single entity salary capped league and stuff like that. And it wasn't like you didn't get into this thing with billionaires and millionaires who, quite frankly, like you wonder now, some of these baseball guys even really love baseball or even care about baseball coming back. So I think there was a collective mindset here among Major League Soccer owners and executives and players. And it wasn't a super smooth negotiation. There was some back and forth here. I don't think everybody was happy, but I think they all agreed, and they said, look, we got an opportunity here to get back before everybody else. We're going to agree to this and figure it out, and that's resulted in us talking about MLS on the radio, which would never happen otherwise.
Kevin Kinkead joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Kinkead. The other guy you mentioned Don Garber, who was on the Sports Center special last night, but also Philadelphia Union's own Alejandro Bedoya. And one of the things they talked about on the broadcast last night was the fact that he was one of the athletes wearing the shirt saying more than an athlete. And they asked him about it, and he feels like they're going to have an opportunity because of their platform to speak out on issues of social justice and everything going on in the world. So what opportunities are going to be afforded to guys like Bedoya when soccer returns, you believe?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear him say that, too, because I think that runs counter to what you're hearing from Kyrie Irving and Dwight Howard and some of the NBA players who were talking about, or if we come back early now, are we going to lose momentum for Black Lives Matter or this push for social justice, racial equality and things like that. And to Bedoya's point, not just the exclusivity of going first for MLS, but the idea that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on sports in general when it comes back. And I don't see, if the Union go out on if their first game is on July 9th, I think is when it's going to be against Nashville. Bedoya scores a goal and the Union win 3-1, and then he's on national television on ESPN at 11 o'clock in the morning when a lot of people are watching, and he's got an open platform to say whatever he wants to say. So I mean, that's something that maybe you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Likewise, if Tobias Harris goes out in the Sixers return, he scores 22 points, and he gets an opportunity or a one-on-one or some time in front of the camera, some extended time with the ESPN personalities are going to be down there. Maybe he can say what he has to say too, and maybe that platform is bigger than it would be otherwise. I don't know if that's more significant than them being able to march and physically be here in these protests and demonstrations and stuff like that. But to Ali's point, yeah, I mean, it's like you're getting a platform that you might not have otherwise.
Now, Bedoya is a midfielder, so, again, my knowledge of soccer, which is literally basically I played it when I was younger and I've watched the World Cup. So I might be like a tiny bit more qualified than like the average person, but barely about soccer. The last time I checked, the midfielders don't score a lot of goals. So,
right.
I don't know how many chances Bedoya is going to be able to have in front of the camera. So is there another player on the Union who may get more screen time, more visual time that would have those opportunities in front of the camera?
It's weird because, Bedoya is the captain, so he's kind of like the de facto leader on the team. But it's funny because they don't really have a superstar. They play like the most consistent team game on the planet. They had a 15-goal scorer last year. His name was Kasper Shabilko. He'll score a bunch of goals this year, and he's a decent interview as well. They have a guy named Jamiro Montero who they paid $3 million for. He's a really small, tiny midfielder, really mobile, low to the ground, fun to watch on the ball. They have personalities and some guys who will score some goals and some interesting dudes. Ilsinho is this guy who comes off the bench. He's a Brazilian guy who has all these crazy dribbling moves and stuff like that. But it's funny because, there's not Bedoya is kind of like the leader of the team and the captain, but he's not going to bang in a bunch of goals for you. He's more of a glue guy. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see them come back as like a team playing a team game where, if you had like a David Beckham or something like that, obviously, it'd be a lot easier to kind of focus on one guy. But if they come back and play well, great. I think people would latch on to this team. They are, I hate to beat the cliche into the ground, but they are kind of like a Philly, blue collar, hardworking kind of team, and they play good defense and they press together. They move up the field. So, God willing, they'll come out and they won't look too rusty, in the first game, and then maybe they'll pull some fans who say, hey, this isn't bad at all.
Well, the good thing for soccer is that you can get away with being rusty in the first half of a game, and then the second half score your goal. So you at least have that going for you. Speaking of the Union, so Kevin Durant's a minority investor now. So should we care? Should we not care? What's the deal? I mean, Kevin Durant's a pretty big name. So, and we know that James Harden's also an investor in the MLS team. So, what is the significance of Durant investing and becoming part of the ownership group?
Well, the Philadelphia Union made it to the front page of ESPN for the first time ever. So that was a big deal. And again, it's just Kevin Durant, his name recognition. When you attach yourself to somebody who's as well known as he is, an international superstar with clout, then that gives your relatively small local franchise a boost. And people say, oh, KD is involved with Philadelphia Union. They Google Philadelphia Union. We end up talking about it on the radio again. Here we are. So the team he put in 5%. I guess he's got a 5% stake, and the valuation of the Union is probably around $300 million, $325 million, because that's based off of what the latest expansion fees were to get into Major League Soccer. I think that's what Charlotte paid. I think they paid $325. So Durant probably put something like $17 or $18 million into the product. But the thing that intrigues me the most, honestly, is a lot of these foreign soccer players are huge NBA fans. They're huge NBA fans. And a lot of NBA players, because of the international flair, are huge soccer fans as well. Josh Richardson has been down to Subaru a couple times. Furkan Korkmaz, Raul Neto. Joel Embiid is a huge Real Madrid fan. So all it really takes is one guy like Kevin Durant or one soccer superstar like Antoine Griezmann, for example, who plays for Barcelona. He's a huge NBA fan. He befriends Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant says, by the way, I invest in this team in Philadelphia. Why don't you at least come down and talk to head coach Jim Curtin? That's a relationship that didn't exist before.
So that's a whole side I wasn't aware of. So there's an opportunity for Durant not just to put money into the franchise, but also being a recruiting tool for guys in Europe to come to MLS.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at, there's a team out in Los Angeles, LAFC, and they have a massive ownership group. Mia Hamm is part of it. Nomar Garcia Parra. They're actually married. Mia Hamm is married to Nomar Garcia Parra, but Magic Johnson's involved. Will Ferrell is involved. Matthew McConaughey, I think, is involved with the new expansion team in Austin. And really, that's all it is. It sounds stupid, but I'll give you an example. There was a guy who came and played for the Union in 2015. His name was Tranquillo Barnetta. He was a Swiss superstar, played in a couple World Cups. And it's just because the reason he came to Philadelphia and talked to Philadelphia is because he used to play with one of the other Union players in Germany. So, I mean, all you really need is that kind of foot in the door, that connection there. And then, hey, a lot of these guys like American sports. They like American culture. They want to come over here and they want to end their careers here. They want to play here someday. And so, having that entry point with a guy like Kevin Durant, I think that's going to, bring some attention to your club that otherwise you would not be able to garner.
So then what are the financial impacts of that? Because I think one of the things that confuses people is that basically in soccer, you basically can buy people, right? So how does that work for the MLS then? So you have Kevin Durant, fill in the blank player wants to come to the MLS. So how would that all work financially? Because at the end of the day, it's still a business. And, obviously the MLS, you mentioned $300 million value plus of the Philadelphia Union. That's not billions of dollars like the NFL. So how does that all work financially?
Yeah, it's all very complicated. MLS has a lot of complicated rules, but I'll give you the real simple explanation. MLS is the only salary capped soccer league in the world. Every other soccer league plays like baseball, where you can pay as much as you want, right? There's no cap in the Premier League or with Barcelona, right? But in the United States, you're allowed to have 3 guys who make money above the salary cap. And that was a rule that they created to get David Beckham here in the first place, because you weren't going to pay him $100,000, right? You can pay what you're talking about are transfer fees, where if a guy is under contract with another team, they can transfer somebody from Real Madrid to the Philadelphia Union, and we'll pay $10 million for that. So that's just a one-time fee to bring him over here. Then you have to pay them their salary as well. The Union have historically been low spenders. They don't pay a lot in transfer fees. They're not going to go out and pay $15 million for this guy to come over here. But you don't know if that changes. If you have a guy like Kevin Durant who's here and he says, hey, this guy wants to come over here, then maybe they say, hey, we've never had a shot to sign a guy of this quality before. Maybe it's worth paying $10 million for him. So there's the salaries, which are one thing, which are capped, and then you have transfer fees, which you can pay whatever in those.
Now, one of the things that's come up as well is, now we know that the MLS is going to Orlando. The NBA is also going to Orlando. But one of the concerns of the NBA players is, hey, there's been a spike in 20 states now, one of them being Florida, of positive tests for coronavirus. Is there any similar concerns for the MLS and their players heading down there? Or do they feel like, because of what they've seen with Bundesliga, that they can insulate enough to not have to worry about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, theoretically, if the plan that they've drawn up is strong enough, then you should feel pretty safe and pretty isolated and quarantined in the bubble. I mean, I think one of the beefs was that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the NBA they were talking about housekeepers and some Disney personnel and some other people who were not affiliated with the NBA being able to come and go, or there was some kind of breach in the protocol where it wasn't going to be completely hermetically sealed or whatever. So I think that's the issue you run into. I mean, if they've drawn up these elaborate plans to say that you go from the hotel to the cafeteria to the court to the hotel to the cafeteria to the court, it's no problem. But if what's happening in Florida right now kind of bleeds into the bubble in some way, shape, or form, then that would be a cause for concern, of course. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But, I mean, I personally don't think anybody should be surprised that once they started to relax, guidelines down there, that the numbers would go up a little bit, So it's a little iffy, but, if they trust the plan that they put in place, then it should be okay.
Now, you also write about the Sixers for Crossing Broad. I have to ask you before you get out of here, your interest level in the Sixers coming back is what? And if it is high, what would be your expectations for this Sixers team, considering this is probably the most inconsistent team in the NBA?
It's sky high expectations. I mean, listen, Josh, the thing that I've done Mike's show 400 times in the last couple of years, and the thing we always talk about on that show is Brett Brown has never had a healthy team going into the playoffs ever. This may be the best shot at that ever. Depending on if Ben Simmons can get back to 100% in the next 6 weeks or whatever. But again, we said all year that this was a team that was built for the playoffs. Tough defense. They're going to bring it every night. you eliminate the home court and road court advantages and disadvantages, and you put everybody onto a neutral floor. Really, you're playing in a vacuum here. So I would actually argue that we can do more to evaluate this team, more to evaluate Brett Brown, assuming that there's no coronavirus issues and everybody's motivated and everybody wants to play, because really you're taking away all the external factors and you're just saying it's going to be on the talent of the players, how good the coach is, and whether they're motivated to win, because you're really just taking away everything external. You're putting these guys into an Orlando vacuum, and let's just play basketball and see who's the best.
Well, you mentioned motivated. Then before I let you go, Embiid claims he's motivated, if you believe all the quotes out there. So do we believe Embiid and his, I've been working out 6 days a week, and Ben Simmons looking more swole than ever? Or, is that all just social media bleck?
No, I mean, we're going to find out. Ben's a competitor for sure. Joel's fitness and his ability to ramp up and get in shape, I think, is always going to be a question mark. Because if they're only going to play 8 games before the playoffs, I don't know how many minutes he's going to be able to log. But the Sixers and Sixers fans should be looking at this as like a lifeline. You were sixth place, and there was a malaise hanging over this team, this overcast black cloud of negativity, And when coronavirus, like, not to lessen a serious situation, but when COVID came, the Sixers nobody was paying attention to basketball anymore, so they got to, go off to the side, rehab, take a step back, watch video, and then now you come back with 8 games left to play. You don't have to win a Game 7 on the road in Orlando, so really the situation, I personally think, worked out really good for the Sixers.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking more about the NBA as it gets closer. And who knows, if the MLS picks up and they steal some of baseball's fans, which is probably easier to do considering there might not even be baseball this summer. MLS may gain some traction, and people can follow you on Twitter at Kevin_Kinkead for all that coverage, at Crossing Broad as well. As our guest, Kevin, appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Kevin, appreciate your time today.
Anytime, Josh. I'll talk to you down the road, all right?
Absolutely. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your text messages next, 609-403-0973, here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Welcome back into the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to text board right now, 609-403-0973. Rob from Bayville checking back in, says, Warford is definitely the way to go. Immediately started as a rookie and didn't give up a sack that entire season. That's Rob from Bayville. Yeah, listen, if there was no obstacle, I would say that Warford is the guy you want to get. He's probably the best of that list that Adam Kaplan put out there. And, of course, you got that whole list at 973ESPN.com, what the Eagles' options are. My question, though, is because of Warford's age, he's in his late 20s, he's been very good in the NFL. Why is he still a free agent? Is there something when it comes to money or years or something that has prohibited him from signing? That would be my only question or concern, because sometimes with these guys, you have to wonder, is there some other issue why he's available? So, again, that's kind of where my perspective is on it. I think that, there has to be some reason why that guy is available. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT chimes in and says, a guard is a lineman who's not good enough to play tackle. First of all, that's completely unfair, because playing guard and playing tackle are not one and the same. And I'm sure Trey Thomas, when he joins Mike Gill and Hunter Brody coming up at 5:30, can explain that even more, because you're asked to do different things. The leveraging is different. The style of play is different. The physicality, the position is different. So that's completely unfair. Just saying a guard is a guy who can't play tackle is basically like saying a first baseman is a guy who can't play third base. It's not even equal. They're different positions, different skill sets, different needs from the position. Dan from EHC goes on to say the Eagles should just cut Brooks. 2 Achilles injuries. He's had a lot of injuries and other issues as well. First of all, that's completely unfair, because Brooks has only actually missed 1 start. I read you the stat earlier. He started all these games with the Eagles in the last 3 years. So it's not like he's out there missing games all the time. And when he has had injuries, he's come back the very next year. And from what we understand, this is basically a fluke injury. The guy was rehabbing from another injury, hurt himself, and tore his Achilles. You can't act like the guy is constantly getting hurt. And just because someone listen, everyone knows about, the mental health stuff that he has talked about. I will never, ever hold against somebody being honest about the personal problems they deal with off the field or off the court. Everyone has problems. Everyone has issues. Brandon Brooks is one of the best guards in the NFL. And just because he's not out there playing right now doesn't change that. The dude's a beast. The dude is one of the 3 best guards in the NFL. And frankly, I would argue that he is one of the most underrated players on the offensive line. Because as I said earlier, Jason Kelce is not a power center. He's a special athlete. He's very intelligent, but he doesn't have a lot of power. Brooks is a massive 330-plus pound guard who is the guy who can take on the other team's most powerful interior linemen, protecting Kelce at times. So just because Brooks has had a couple injuries and because he's more honest than most people are about the things he deals with off the field, doesn't mean you should cut him. I think that's completely unfair, Dan from EHD. But I give you a lot of credit for putting your name on it and willing to put that opinion out there. A lot of people, they would just text it and not put their name on it at all. Listen, I think that if all things were equal, my solution, as I said earlier, is I would sign Warford to a 2-year deal. I would make the first year guaranteed, the second year non-guaranteed money, so that way you have an insurance policy in case Brooks comes back and maybe he's not ready for week 1 next year. At least you still have the guard from the previous year ready for the next year. And it's non-guaranteed. That way, if Brooks is ready to go, you can just let Warford walk because you did give Brooks a massive contract. So the guy is under contract. And as I said, Warford is in his late 20s. So to me, there's value there, aside from the fact that he's very good.